Welcome everyone to the PYRESWAP show. And of course, we're always just so humbled and honored and just absolutely overjoyed to have you with us today. Today is Wednesday, as we like to call it Wisdom Wednesday. And I think that the most important thing to talk about today is locus of control. Locus of control. And locus, for those of you who don't know what that word means, it can mean something mathematical, like where we're talking with the hyperbola. But what locus really means, and in fact, I'll bring up the perfect definition. I believe it's like location, but yeah, locus. A particular position, point, or place. Yeah, can I get a screen share, Mr. Producer? A particular position, point, or place, the curve, like we're not gonna do the mathematical one, but what we're talking about here, locus of control, is this is something that is a lot overlooked. It's a lot overlooked, and it's a lot of, it's an area of wisdom where most human beings don't realize how much power they have over their results. There was some sort of scientific study. It was done, I don't know, a few decades ago. It was done by a university. I don't have a citation for you. But they looked at a whole bunch of people. They brought in probably, I don't know, 100 people, and they asked those 100 people to tell their life story. And they brought in 100 people that led lives that were significantly above average, and especially they were looking at net worth. And they looked at a whole bunch of people whose lives were specifically below average. Or they put it on a spectrum. I don't fucking know. Anyways, what they figured out is that the more above average somebody's life was, the more above average somebody's results were, the more they had an internal locus of control. And the more below average, or really the shittier their life was, they had an external locus of control. And the reason this matters so much is that they had them, as they had them tell their life story, they would be starting off at childhood, they would be starting off at their early adulthood and be going on further and further. If they talked about the major things happening in their life as if these were things that were happening to them, they were likely going to live a below average life. If they talked about things that happened in their life like they were the ones who caused it, whether it was good or bad, they were more likely going to produce above average results. I hope that this makes sense. These are these small differences, which again, they can seem microscopic in the present moment. But the difference of a 1.01% over time, this is something that leverages the law of compounding. Does that make sense to you guys? So believe it or not, as we live our lives, as we spend each day, as day turns to night and night turns to day, we are actually compounding a lot of the microscopic details of our life into the week, into the month, into the year, into the decade. This is why two people can start off with relatively the same life but end up in drastically different areas. Some people win the lottery, of course, but for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this statistic, 70% of lottery winners declare bankruptcy, and about 97% of them, they never go higher than their lottery winnings. Actually, Jeff, there was a twin study on this, and believe it or not, there's actually a few different ones. So one of them, do you know who Wim Hof is? Yeah, do you know who Wim Hof is? Yeah, so Wim Hof has a twin brother. Yeah, Wim Hof has a twin brother. So you could look at Wim Hof against his twin. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. Now, so Wim Hof is one twin study. But additionally, yes, the Iceman, the cold showers guy. There was another study in a book, and it might have been in Freakonomics, or it might have been in The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. There was a guy who was drunk as fuck, and he literally named his sons Winner and Loser. Yeah, by the way, yeah. He named his sons Winner and Loser. I have no idea why. Legitimately, Winner, does that make sense? Winner actually became a total shithead. Yeah, and Loser became like highly above average. Does that make sense? Yeah, I don't really know if this is exactly an applicable twin study to what I just talked about, internal locus of control. I wish I had a citation for you, and like most of the time, if you Google the word locus of control, Jeff, you'll be able to find, I think, a whole bunch of studies about it. That's the best lead I can give you. But yeah, legitimately, I'm not the first person throwing this out on the internet. Does that make sense? But I want you guys to understand as well, this is now our project, right? As old as it is, along this journey, we've encountered all types of setbacks, adversity, etc., right? But that really is par for the course. And the only thing for me to do is to internalize my locus control, pivot, change myself, do what it takes to make the best. Is it not screen sharing? Oh, yeah, we can go back to screen share, I guess. Thank you, Mr. Producer. We're still looking at the same thing. Yep, right here. Yeah, legitimately. Yep. Okay. Legitimately, you know, I could blame a whole bunch of external things, like, okay, I didn't know the season was gonna focus on this, or I didn't know that the social media we were using was gonna shift, etc., etc. Really? Okay, I didn't know this. Oh, okay. All right, it's working now. Yeah, sorry. Legitimately on my own app, for whatever reason, it kind of just like it just died and came back. I don't really know why. But yeah. Anyways, the point being here is that, like, while you guys know, as we go through this project and all of the lofty ambitions it has, part of doing this live stream, this broadcast, I hope it adds value to your life in ways that aren't just related to this project. So, like, whatever your wildest ambition is, like whatever path you want your life to go in, you're going to be able to realize more and more of it by internalizing your locus of control. And I believe Jocko Willink wrote a book about this, and I think he called it Extreme Ownership. Have you guys heard about that before? Extreme ownership. This runs right into parallel with the idea of extreme ownership. Jeff, have you heard of Jocko Willink? Yeah. Anybody else? I get up at 2 a.m. If you guys don't know that. Yeah. I always try to bring that up, right? There's a bunch of other images as well. Let's see. This is kind of like a more this thing right here. Actually, this is a terrible image. But legitimately, if you guys have never heard me say this before, here, I'll write this out. Yeah. The world you expect is the world you project. And in English, this just sounds so poetic, right? And by the way, I'm pretty sure this is a real Five quote, by the way. Yeah, I don't think that anybody else said this before me. But I was basically taught this in a much broader idea, and I was able to turn it into a soundbite. So, you know, you're welcome. But what I mean to say is that, like, just like this locus of control, your worldview, like, depending on, like, whether you think that day has opportunity or whether you think that day is robbed of it, that's going to be the exact route you navigate. If you wake up and you see the world as an evil place, you're going to begin adapting to the world as an evil place. This is your nature. We as Homo sapiens, we're not really adapted to living in a world where you have digital live streams on multi-platforms to, let's see, talk about exotic banking in Web3, etc., that we're also on multiple continents, right? Like the type of things that we do in our day-to-day are just so very, very far away from the brain that we were evolved in. And because of that, the only thing we can leverage to kind of really succeed is our own neuroplasticity. Do you guys understand what neuroplasticity is? It's our ability to adapt and change to the environment that we're in. If you've ever seen like a toddler play with an iPad, they're extremely good rapidly because their brains are so neuroplastic when they're young. The more that you kind of invest in your neuroplasticity as you age, you can continue to do that. The older people are sometimes, they struggle to adapt. And I know that anybody who's dealt with somebody in the later decades of life, they just don't have like the same technological literacy that somebody much younger would have because their brains just lose neuroplasticity over time and they were adapted to a world that no longer exists. If you're, I think just about everybody listening to me, if you think about how much technology has changed over the last 40 years, consider that I think most people listening here might live at least another 40. What technology could be in another 40 years could be so unimaginable that I actually don't want to go down that path. It kind of gives me the creeps. But does anybody have any questions on the locus of control? 4-hour sauna, yeah. Yeah, I get up at 2 a.m. Yeah. The first thing I do is I eat a bowl of broken glass. Then I take a 3-hour-long ice shower. Yep. Then I do a sauna. Yeah, where I hold my breath the whole time. Yep. I hold my breath the whole time. I'm kidding. But speaking of routine. As I was mentored, yeah, those heat shock proteins, yeah, it burns fat. In general, as far as things you can do every day, to hone and leverage your most powerful weapon, which is yourself, there are 2 sets of 3. And there's the 3 areas of self-management. Do you guys know what they are? Have I taught this before? Absolutely. Yeah. You want to be grounded. Fexer. Yeah. These 3 things about yourself in your life, like if you're not managing these 3 things, you can probably assume that the rest of your life will be mismanaged. Because things like your diet and your sleep and your time, they all affect how your brain works. So you managing your time, you managing your diet, you managing your sleep, that's going to effectively create the version of you that you are that day. Because our neurochemistry changes day to day. Does that make sense? So just having any system in place to manage your diet, manage your sleep, and manage your time, you're going to immediately have an advantage over 99% of people, because most people don't think about this at all. When you say cracking, do you mean, oh yeah, because they all leverage each other. Is that what you're saying, Jeff? Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah, 100%. 100%. It can be difficult as fuck to work on all 3 at a time, too. Yeah, I would say like work on 1 at a time as well. Like work on an area where you can improve that area. For me, diet is actually most important. Yeah, but I didn't learn that diet was most important until I tried all 3, if that makes sense. Yeah, so legitimately, like any one of these areas, your sleep quality can improve like by double by just having a diet that isn't inflammatory. For those of you who can tell by my accent, this show is in the United States of America, where quite often the food that's in our grocery stores is a direct assault on our health, if that makes sense. Yeah, direct assault on our health. The burgers aren't even the problem. Yeah, the burgers, if it's just red meat and cheese, that's not a problem. Yeah, America, yeah, the meat and the cheese, that's not even the problem. Yeah, it's all the things that are in boxes that have long shelf lives, or they have certain preservatives or certain ingredients. These are the things that are just like, they're poisons. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to get all fucking polarizing here, but this is effectively what happens when America doesn't really have like a baseline culture. I'm not going to get into all that right now. Diet, sleep, and time. Indeed, yeah. When the problem isn't even the problem. But I want you guys to understand as well, when we talk about this project, I'm always trying to find the most, how do I describe, the most buried thing, the most edificial problem, not always the most superficial problem. Because sometimes a superficial problem is a distraction, and it can be solved by proxy of solving something more edificial as well. And I hope that, like, if I can at least talk about this philosophy with you guys, and at least show the consistency, we're all going to make it. Yeah, right? Anyways, on top of self-management, in the day-to-day, you can also work on self-improvement in these 3 areas. as I was mentored, these three areas are your mind, your body, and your spirit. And when I was first, I guess you could say, taught this lesson, my mentor who I was asking this, I asked him the reason he wakes up at 4 a.m. and he does work out when he wakes up. He reads the Bible every day. He reads a chapter of Proverbs. And he also listens to audiobooks all day long as well as read books. And that is effectively reading a book that increases your knowledge of your mind, exercises your body, and then doing something religious and or spiritual daily is what works on your spirit. You do need to invest in your spirit because your spirit allows you to kind of come up with the courage and motivation to plow through things that may not be sexy in the day-to-day. If I didn't work on my spirit, we would not be 2 years into this, would we? Yeah, like I just want you to know that. Yeah, like me working on these three things has been absolutely critical to keeping this moving when every single apocalyptic scenario would have probably wiped out weaker projects. What would that make sense to you? But my mentor, when he first kind of taught me this, he said that this is not an insurance policy, this is a forsurance policy. Because he knows that no matter what he gets in his life, no matter what the cards are dealt to him, as long as he's improving these three areas, one, he's waging a war against aging. So as he gets older, he continues to get sharper. Most people, as they get older, they do not get sharper. Does that make sense? Like, you're always going to get your brain be a little more useless. Your body is going to be a little less strong. Your spirit, I actually don't even know how that works, but yeah. To be clear, yeah. I hope this is good Wisdom Wednesday content for you guys. I think I'm trying to go a little more high effort in the Wisdom Wednesday because I think Wisdom Wednesday is where I can show a lot of myself, and I think that's sometimes critical in believing in the grand scheme of things. I hope that makes sense. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Thank you, Pega. Thank you. And by the way, I'm fucking privileged that I was even like, yeah. Indeed, Jeff. I am fucking privileged that like at the point in my life where I even had a mentor, I lived in a house where everybody was doing crazy ass drugs. I legitimately believe that everybody who made it in the world was running a scam. I was much younger, but like the cobweb that I had fallen into in my life, nothing good was happening for me there. And I had to be shocked, I had to be catalyzed, I had to be configured out of this. And my life had to get to a certain low point for me to even figure out that I was actually the problem. Because before this point in my life, I did not have the self-awareness to really understand that even though that life is going to give you a simulation, right? Maybe we live in a simulation. Life is going to simulate that there's a whole bunch of random things happening. There's a whole bunch of things out of your control. But there's always one area where you can control. And if you can always focus on that, you're not going to disempower yourself. You're always going to believe that you have the power to control things. And the more you believe that, and the more you do it, you're actually going to acquire that power. And that's on whatever you're doing. Whether you're doing a live stream, whether you're trying to run a bakery, whether you want to become a lawyer, whether you want to be a filmmaker, all of these things. But whatever the vision that the universe plugs into your brain about what you do with your life, these fundamentals, and I know this is a blank board here, but these fundamentals will always apply. And they will always increase your likelihood of actually hitting that target. Things that get in the way of this are arrogance and ego. And when we are under stress, we have a stress hormone called cortisol. It gets into our brain. Indeed, Fexer, indeed. As cortisol is one of the most, cortisol as a neurohormone is responsible for trillions of dollars of loss every year. Cortisol. You guys have heard of cortisol, right? Cortisol. Wars. Fucking espionage. Fucking recession. Oh, is that what it is? Okay, sorry. We had apparently a bunch of crying babies outside the window, because I guess there's crying babies outside the window today. But yes, cortisol as a stress hormone. Indeed, indeed. And the thing is, people aren't even aware of cortisol when it happens. And cortisol is something that if you become aware of it, you can manage it. And sometimes you're going to be stressed out about something, and you're going to project that stress to anything. If you have your cortisol neurohormone like high at a band, you're going to fucking hate everything. You're going to lash out. I've done it myself. You guys have seen me do it in chats, on streams. However, the day by day, it's through a practice we can get better at managing our cortisol. If you get better at managing your cortisol, you make the world a better place, because you can in fact contribute to wars and espionage and recession and violence and things like that. It just won't happen. Cortisol is what puts us into a fight or flight state. Are you guys aware of this? Have you guys heard of fight, flight, or freeze? Have you guys heard of that animal state? When you're in an animal state of fight, flight, or freeze, cortisol, it shuts off your higher brain function. It puts you only in the animal. And because it shuts off your higher brain function, you can't solve problems. You cannot think creatively about solving any problem. It doesn't matter what the problem is. It doesn't matter if it's like maybe your car got a flat tire, or maybe your phone screen broke or something, or maybe you can't find your keys. Like, it could be a small problem. It could be a large problem. A death in the family. And you name it. Yeah. If cortisol like becomes dominant, like you're not going to think about anything. Like you're going to go to fight, flight, or freeze. You can see cortisol on the price charts in economics. Yeah, indeed. And arguably, Rolf, in my opinion, cortisol would be something that prevented the previous devs from actually thinking about the problem, because they would be on the reactive from all of their investors, like DMing them, like, do something, right? And they end up, the computer programmers, they also spend all the time looking at their computer screen. So they get blue light all up in their eyes, right? So they fuck up their sleep schedule. Since they fuck up their sleep schedule, they're not managing their cortisol. And then they have a bunch of people DMing them, right? Like, hey, can you solve this problem? What's going on? And they end up just fucking running away from it. If you guys get what I'm saying. So cortisol, you can see it right here in our own neck of the woods. It has definitely been something you can see at a scale in our neck of the woods. Like, people just freak out. They just resign themselves. They don't want to solve the problem. They don't want to own the problem. They fight, flight, or freeze. So they either become hostile or they run away. It happens. But legitimately, if you can take some time to take a deep breath sometimes just taking a deep breath will get your cortisol under control. Your problems might not be as big as they seem if you can get your cortisol under control. If you've ever heard the saying, and this is definitely true in English, so if you don't speak English as your first language, I don't know if this is true, but whenever there's like a tough problem, some people say, I need to go sleep on it, meaning I need to go to sleep, and as I sleep, my body's gonna go through a cortisol cycle. Yes, exactly. So they go to sleep, literally what Rolf is saying right now. So like they go to sleep, they're able to rest and relax, and they're gonna get their brain back into a more creative state. By the way, a lot of artists, if you guys don't know this, a lot of artists, they do all their creative work first thing in the morning. Some of them wake up at, stupid hours like I do. So I know like a bunch of musicians that they get into the studio at 6 a.m. because if they're there at 6 a.m., they know that their brain's gonna be the most creative. And even across a day, our brains are meant to go through like this cycle of lethargy. Like you're meant to get tired out. It's meant to happen to you, right? Like we exist as a derivative of the planet we live on, right? So we are kind of like behest to its systems. And in the afternoon, for instance, one of the reasons that the Monday stream is quite often the stream that I feel like I do the best at is because it's way earlier in the day for me, if that makes sense. I'm trying to, again, spread that quality more across the streams, but like I might end up just doing that by writing the show all 4 days on Monday, if that makes sense, and then not kind of letting myself be at the behest of how I feel at the given moment. Like I'm trying to, of course, make my standard of quality for this delivery be as consistent as possible. Consistency is the hallmark of greatness, as they say. But cortisol, if you guys aren't aware of this, our neurohormones meaning things like dopamine or neurotransmitters, whatever. Yeah, our neurochemistry, dopamine, serotonin, etc. Right? I'll just write etc. All of these chemicals, they existed on this planet for a long time before spinal cords did. And why do I bring that up? I don't know very much about my audience, right? I don't know your personal details, but I do know that you probably have a spinal cord, whether it's functional or not, right? I actually have a friend who, he's in a wheelchair, right? But he still has a spinal cord. Does that make sense? Right? If you guys have the ability to communicate to me on a keyboard or with your hands, you must have some version of your spinal cord intact. The reason I'm pointing this out is that your life would be very, very different if you lost access to your spinal cord. Does that make sense? You would be fully paralyzed. Does anybody disagree with this assessment about the spinal cord? And what I mean to say, Javery, is that these chemicals are older than chordata by hundreds of millions of years. So these chemicals, the way ferns bloom and the way bugs fly, yeah, these chemicals are so much more ancient than us. They're ancient. Because they're so ancient, understand that we are even more beholden to these neurochemicals than we are to our own spine. So if everybody here agrees that your spine is like the most critical bone in your body, I want you to understand your spine is still the great-great-grandbaby of these. And these are not the only neurotransmitters. There's like 7 dozen. But yeah, you guys know like the major 10. You might have heard of them before. I'm really into neurochemistry, and neurochemistry is a big deal in Web3 and in economics, if you guys aren't aware. Neurochemistry is something you can see on the marketing side. You can see it on the price chart. You can see it on social media. It's very interesting to see how legitimately you can see neurochemistry aggregated in certain parts of whether it's people betting on Trump's company because he won, or people leaving the country. People are committing suicide over the election, by the way, which my heart goes out to that because I'm always against that. Neurochemistry, like in mass, it's like this gigantic resource that is just dominates so much more of human society than even our spinal cord does. So you can think about how much our spinal cord affects everything we do. These neurotransmitters are still significantly superior to us than the spinal cord. So I hope you guys get what I'm saying. Like, this is a much more ancient animal. This animal has not needed to change. It's not an animal, you get what I'm saying. But this force of governance, this part of these are like laws of being biologic. Does that make sense? These neurochemicals are like the laws of biology, if that makes sense. And these laws are much older than spinal cords because there's a lot of life forms on this planet that don't worry about spinal cords. Do you guys know what I mean? In fact, only 55,000. Chordata, the order, has only 55,000 species. In comparison, mollusca, meaning snails and things like that, 85,000 species. Yeah, so there's more types of snails, clams, octopus, shit like that. 85,000 known species. Probably more than that in the dark part of the ocean. But as far as animals with spinal cords, maybe 55,000 species. Yeah, that's including dinosaurs and shit too. Yeah. Arthropods, it's like 1.7 million species. So I'm not even going to open up arthropods. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, invertebrates. Invertebrates, they are also governed by these neurotransmitters. Plants and fungi and fucking... I actually don't know about bacteria, but yeah, plants and fungi also governed by these neurotransmitters. I guess what I'm trying to say is that these are important. And they can be hard to think about because thinking about them is using them. And they're inside our brain, which is an area where our eyes are not designed to look. You have to look at what most people are not looking at to, I think, find the gold, in a coal mine, if that makes sense, or how to make the best of a bad situation. Anyways, yeah. Who has a question? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions about locus of control? This was meant to be content that was very specific to Wisdom Wednesday, if that makes sense. You know, when people talk about like what wisdom is, you know, it's not about like wisdom being separate from knowledge in the sense that like knowledge is very, very technical, and I think wisdom is very, very fundamental. Yeah, how to take control of locus. Great question, Jeff. I think it's going to be a gradual process because I would say nobody's perfect at it, and sometimes I still feel like other people, you know, it's easy to get angry at other people. We're programmed to do that. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Producer. Yoga. Okay, well, Jeff, I would say that it might be about becoming aware of our internal monologue first. Yeah. And it might often be on self-reflection. So if you can look at your last week and you can think about, did I have a negative encounter where I could have in fact done something different to make it a positive encounter? Did I in fact cause something undesired to happen to me, whether I realized I was doing it or not? Have you guys ever heard this before? Did I make the most of my time? Yeah. The only way to do that, there's something called a time audit, where you can literally, having whiteboards in your house is great for this, by the way, but you literally write down every hour and you set an alarm on your phone. Does that make sense? And then legitimately every time that alarm goes off, you're like, okay, I'm going to write down what I did since the last time I wrote down. Does that make sense? And you can figure out where you're spending time. By the way, Jeff, I figured out that I spend like up to 13 hours doing these calls, meetings, and live streams a week. But then I also spend up to 5 hours in my DMs and in chats. Like, it's like, do I need to spend 5 hours doing that? Can I figure out a way to schedule that time, right? Because sometimes answering DMs is not always what's moving the needle on finishing this journey called PYRESWAP. Does that make sense? Like some DMs, they're useful conversations. Other DMs, it's like, we're not even talking about PYRESWAP. Yeah, we're not talking about that at all. It's like, you know, and it's like I have to be respectful, right? But then at the same time, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like can you figure out how to do this? I never read the 4-Hour Workweek because I kind of think that like what's useful, okay, what's similar to that is the Pareto principle. And what it means is that the 80-20 rule, it actually applies that like the way you spend 20% of your time is what actually creates 80% of your results. If that makes sense? So sometimes you need to be able to do an audit on that, figure out what is the 20 that I'm doing that's causing the 80, and then can I eliminate stuff that I'm not doing and do more of that 20? And that requires iteration, but it is, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I can not say I'm an expert at this. Yeah, I'm always, oh shit, can you hear me? Audio check, audio check. Audio check. Thank you. We have that as an emoji. Yeah, the Anchorman joke. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? My audio check. Audio check. It is working. Okay. All right. So I'll be honest. Jeff, I sometimes think of that as what I call hyper economizing. Right. This is also good for wisdom. This is also good for wisdom because hyper-economizing, what this is human nature. It's always saying, how do I get the absolute most for doing the absolute least? Does that make sense? And the problem with this, and I'm going to talk about it compared to what Tim Ferriss is saying, the majority of people don't realize, but if everyone is doing this, it stops working. Does that make sense? If everybody's always hyper economizing, it stops working. If you actually want to, I guess, break through, you have to figure out an area where you can outwork everybody. Yeah, like where you're willing to outwork. Okay, when I mean hyper economizing, I mean you're always trying to be as lazy as possible. And it's like a subconscious thing. It's true in marketing. I've been reading marketing books. It's true in the way people invest. It's true in the way people spend their time, if that makes sense. Right? Like everyone's always trying to figure out where they can get like a little less, or like, okay, can I just hit my minimum required? If you've ever worked a job where you get paid by the hour, do you guys know what I'm talking about? Has anyone here ever worked a job where they get paid by the hour? I have. Yeah, that's also correct. I 100% agree with what Rolf is saying there. So I'm not saying that like you need to spend a lot of time doing something, but when people get paid by the hour, and especially when you're young, quite often it's like, okay, I just need to like get this done so I can like go to the rest of my life, which is what happens when I'm not on the clock. Does that make sense? So people end up going home from work on Friday with like a surge of energy. And it's like, where did that surge of energy came from? It's because they weren't using it at work. Does that make sense? Like they're just trying to like get by. They're trying to be like just good enough to not get fired. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? And the fact of the matter is, because everybody is doing that, that's where you even have this class system anyway. Like it's not like it's created with any intention behind it, but it's like if you take these situations, apply human nature and human relationships and interactions to them, you end up cloning this weird scenario where, you know, people who get paid by the hour, quite often, it's not always considered to be the, let's just say that it's not always results-based, if that makes sense. Because if you get paid by results, does that make sense? One, you no longer have to sell your time, and if you have a skill set, you can actually make more money in smaller amounts of time, right? Just being honest, right? Or you can make more money by leveraging smaller things. But that involves having skills. That involves having assets too. But what I mean to say is, if everybody's always trying to do this, and they walk into life and they want to hyper economize, they're not really going to make it, only because, fantastic, Kidezo, bravo. Bravo. Hey guys, yeah, bullish news. Bullish news. We have solved an automation problem today. Yep. Again, little small victories every day, you guys. Little small victories every day. Having things happen consistently. Again, consistency is the hallmark of greatness. Even things like the IWV firing 4 times a day. You guys have no idea how amazing that is because I don't do it, right? Like the community does it. Does that make sense? It does compound in a way that it builds a habit, it builds a skill set, and it builds an understanding of how this machine works. I know that we need more volume and liquidity. I know these things. We need more user base as well. I'm going to solve them all with one home run hit, okay? All runners on base. We're all coming home. That's a very American allegory. I hope you guys understand. Thinking like a banker. Thinking like a banker, I am trying to leverage the most fundamental problem into solving all of the superficial problems, or the technical problems. I'm hoping that makes sense. But what Tim Ferriss is saying, if you're gonna have a 4-hour work week, you still need to be in an area of strength where you don't have competitors. Because if you have a skill set that is fungible, does that make sense? You can't hyper economize. You have to compete. Does that make sense? You have to be willing to do a little bit extra in areas where most people aren't. That's how you separate yourself. If you didn't do this, we would all be broccoli farmers. Does everybody understand the allegory about broccoli farmers? For those of you who've been watching these, for those of you who've been following me for longer than a year, I suppose, I think the broccoli farmer's idea is an entire little short story. I hope that makes sense. If we're all farming the same thing, we can't trade with each other. Yep, exactly. Indeed, right? We can create exponential value by specializing in different areas. Yeah, humans are effectively tribal. You know, there's another animal called the octopus, also very smart, but they're extremely individualistic. And it's considered to be, because they're individualistic, that's why they haven't developed like language yet, or like communicating, because supposedly their brains are smart enough to develop like a language. Like orcas do this shit. I don't know. Orcas are also kind of like, you know, pack animals and stuff, and dolphins are too. But I'm not gonna get on that shit. That's all extreme, you know, scientific LARPing. But it's this tribal nature, this cohesion that kind of allows us to be teammates, allows us to work together to things, but also having our own areas of strength. It's important sometimes to think about what yours is. And I actually have a Venn diagram for this for myself. I'll draw this actually too. And okay, so believe it or not, these are 3 areas where I think that I am above 90th percentile. Does that make sense? And I'll explain what they are. The first one is ideation. Ideation is my ability to brainstorm. Does that make sense? So like I can just brainstorm because I have systems for it, because I have partners for it, and because I've done it and drilled at it so many times. Also because I manage my cortisol, I think that I'm an amazing problem solver only because I can fucking brainstorm at a rate that's like better than 10 people. If that, I'm trying to sound as modest as possible, but if I'm good at one thing and I'm good at 3, one of those things is ideation. Does that make sense? I can brainstorm like a goddamn hurricane. A hurricane of brains. Okay? Another one is, in fact, thank you. Another one is actually called ecodynamicism. Ecodynamicism is a really weird fucking word, but if you can imagine thinking about the world in time-lapse photography. Have you guys ever seen time-lapse photography where there'll be an intersection in New York City and then like all the headlights and taillights blur? Do you guys know what I mean? It's actually diagrams, Jeff, but thank you. I'm kidding. Yeah. I don't like the fact that I have to make up words. Yeah, that's always like, that's anxiety for me. Yeah, I'm kidding. But no, ecodynamicism. Ecodynamicism is the ability to think about entire systems of random things moving. So I can think about the order within large chaotic systems. Yeah, yes, exactly. Time lapse. So I can think about this like thinking about evolution, thinking about economics, thinking about markets, thinking about fucking Bitcoin, right? I can legitimately just think about this and not looking at anything. I can think about a whole bunch of things happening and then create what they call game theory for it. And you know what's crazy? It's like I literally like forgot what I wrote here in this third one, but hang on. That's crazy. I had this written down somewhere else. Anyways, clearly it's not remembering things because when I write something down, I forget to remember it. But the point being is, I have no idea if I'm first in the world at all of these, but I know that if I focus on this area right here and just stay in this area of strength, I'm not gonna spend my life competing doing something fungible, if that makes sense. Yeah, like I'll be able to really be in my own blue ocean where I can. If you guys aren't aware, this is really just phase 1 of a life project, and it's worth it. It's worth it. All the adversity, all the problems, all the setbacks, all the people saying no, all the weird creative ways that we've had to adapt and improvise, it's all worth it. I have, in the last 2 years, been nauseated sometimes with anxiety. I've had to stay awake for multiple days at a time, and it's all worth it. Yeah. It's like getting punched in the stomach some days. It's like getting kicked in the mouth other days. But it's just still worth it. It's just still worth it. At the end of the day, like what we're really going to be able to do from the impact of this project, the lives we'll be able to affect, it really is like, it's like an ideological evolution. It's really like the code of Hammurabi coming. And I know that it really has, yeah. It really has, yeah. We bought the domains in July of 2022. So yeah, in July it would be a full 3. But I think we're still short of 2. We're just a little under, I don't know. We're a little, it's hard to really say. Time has been moving by. Time has been moving by very interestingly, but I am conditioned to think that, like, if the universe is delaying this happening for you, but you keep showing to the universe that you're going to get it, what's going to happen is even better than you expected. I'll tell you guys a story about that real quick. For those of you who don't know, we acquired projects called 2 ohm and 3 ohm. 2 ohm, I'll just write 2 ohm. And before we acquired it, I was literally pining just to do like this very junior partnership with this project. Like, I was like working to be like, hey, maybe we could get this fraction of the whole thing, right? Like maybe, yeah. If you haven't, we can talk about that tomorrow. We're almost out of time here. If we haven't, it's okay. We'll go over that later. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is that my ability to make that happen got shut down. My ability to get like a small slice of 2 ohm was in fact denied me. But then 6 months later, we own the whole thing. Does that make sense to you guys? So every time that we've been denied anything but continue to push forward, the result was always significantly greater. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah. Long in the tooth. Yeah. This is nobody's first rodeo. This is nobody's first rodeo. That's a good meme for the GPSE theme as well. Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to fucking Aslan. And speaking of which, you know, that's a great example of how, you know, fantasy fiction is bankable, to be clear. Yeah. Fantasy fiction as the theme of the project, by the way. By the way, that was not the original intention. I originally, like, I would not have said like, hey, we need to jump on this aesthetic. But from the choice of making that aesthetic, a whole bunch of great things have happened. In fact, Pyre Producer, yeah, that was in fact one of the things that he liked about it when he first saw it. If that makes sense. So like sometimes small choices you make, you have no idea what it could do. But yeah, like, you know, I have to understand that certain things I have control over, but then other things, whether I don't have control over, I still kind of assign it to that, like, I'll adapt to this no matter what. And good things will happen and bad things will happen, but we'll keep moving forward. Anyways, I feel like we did a great job today here on Wisdom Wednesday. Does anyone have any questions? Because I might just end it here in 2 minutes. I would rather have like short quality than you know, go longer than's required. If you're waiting, thank you, Rolf. If you're waiting for me to answer a DM, there is still like 30 people waiting. I'm just gonna be honest. Yeah, I'm trying to focus on stuff that moves the needle, and sometimes running the customer service as well as having side conversations about other things with people is just not always what needs to happen. Yeah. Pega, yes. But you know what, Pega? I am taking all types of action to make that happen. Yeah. I am definitely getting outside the box. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, everybody, I want to thank you for coming to the PYRESWAP show for Wisdom Wednesday. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Different time. Check the time. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.